The first known period of art was the Yangshao period. During this time, there was no pottery wheel, so all the pottery was hand-built. There were two main types of earthenware. One was coarse and gray, built by hand with coils of clay and smothered over to conceal the ridges. The second was used for mortuary purposes and was more fine-grained, utilizing black, red, maroon, and brown designs, usually depicting a simple geometric pattern fish or human faces. Stoneware was also utilized during the Yangshao period. It's a virtuous ceramic made from fire clay. It is fired at high temperatures and does not need glaze. The next period of Chinese art was the Shang period. Bronze vessels were created as a symbol of royalty in the same way that the gold crown represented royalty in Europe. The bronze casting process was fairly simple and included the following steps. Make rubber mold, place mold in wax, remove wax, build a ceramic shell around wax, and pour bronze into ceramic shell. In the following Shangxi Dui period, bronze casting technology as the Vanchan sculpture was dominated by bronze. Bronze was obtained by adding lead to a metallic combination of copper and tin, creating a stronger medium that allowed the creation of larger and heavier objects. The most striking finds in this period of art were dozens of brown masks and heads. The sculptures have elongated proportions and large staring eyes, usually sporting gold foil masks. They could possibly be natural gods worshipped by the Shu people. The period following the Shangxi Dui period was the Zhao period. Jades were used in sacrificial offerings to the gods and in burial rites, to record treaties between states, and also in formal ceremonies at the king's court. Along with jades, the ritual art produced in bronze continued into the Zhao period as well. Inscriptions found on the ritual bronzes show that the importance of ancestor worship at the time. Motives were also being established in bronze by using repetitive stamps, showing hints of development of mass production techniques. Along with bronze pottery, bronze coinage was also beginning to be widely circulated. Chinese symbols such as the dragon started to surface, symbolize ability and magic power. The Chinese believed the dragon could control rains and floods and transport humans in celestial realms. They offered sacrifices to the dragon for favorable weather and good harvest. The Qin period, dating 221 to 206 BC, was quite unique. The art and architecture in this period reflects the political happenings at the time. A unified and centralized country was established, and Xiangyang was the capital of the city in Qin. The emperors were cruel and oppressive and caused dissatisfaction among the people that led to rebellions. Hu Hai was eventually overthrown, ending the Qin Dynasty. Under the rule of a man named Qin Shi Huang, the city's walls were constructed, including the Great Wall, all for the purpose of defense. Noteworthy architectural features in this work include high towers, pillar gates, terraces, and high buildings. The Terracotta Army also came about in this time period. It is a collection of terracotta sculptures depicting the armies of Qi Shi Huang and was buried with him as a form of funerary art whose purpose was to protect him in the afterlife. The terracotta soldiers were manufactured in workshops run by government laborers and local craftsmen that used local materials. They were produced assembly-line style. Their heads, arms, legs, and torsos created separately and then assembled. There were 8 different clay face molds that were used on all of the statues to create facial features. Let's go on to the Han period. The primary goal of the Han Dynasty was to unite China. This era was one of vast military development. The Han Dynasty conquered many surrounding nations and defeated the Huns, running them into the Gobi Desert. During this time, the Silk Road also came into existence. Silk goods were carried to the west, and along with it, Buddhism spread to the west. Along with new culture being introduced and traded from east to west, art started to shift as well. The Chinese began making fine paper, which was considered a revolution in communication and learning. Along with the paper came calligraphy, fine art painting, and an easier way to convey spiritual emotion. Taoism was the main religion in China at the time. However, Confucianism was also very popular. At this time, bronze sculpture also advanced to a new level of complexity and sophistication, as displayed in the bronze horses and bronze statues of men and women. Along with the bronze statues came the bronze decorated mirrors, lamps, gilded bronzeware. Han tombs and graves also contained terracotta sculpture known as Ming Qi or Yong. In the afterlife, the Chinese wanted to surround themselves with representations of people who had given them pleasure during their life, and they did this by incorporating terracotta sculptures in their funerary practices. Like the Egyptians, the Chinese had complex beliefs concerning the afterlife. They filled their tombs with items they believed the soul needed after death. There were ceramic and wood lacquered coffins were also a funerary tradition, and silk weaving was incorporated into tomb banners and costumes. Chinese painting had 4 different formats: hanging scrolls, hand scrolls, album leaves, and fans. Jade carvings and craftsmanship during the Han period were the products of centuries of goldsmithing and jade cutting. Jade was believed to contain cosmic energy and possess mystical, life-giving qualities. In China, the chief building material was timber, but it did not last as a structural medium for long before it was replaced by brick, ceramic tiles, and rammed earth walls. The timber structures that did exist were wooden and had ceramic roof tiles, with many combinations of colors. Screened walls and columns were painted red and had pitched roofs. Later, the Tang Dynasty started in 618 AD. The Tang armies marched across Central Asia, influencing the ideas of Chinese culture. The Tang were Buddhists, and made great monuments. A powerful military state, they extended the boundaries of China through Siberia, Korea in the east, and Vietnam in the south. Later, during the Tang era, Confucianism became more aggressive in fighting Buddhist influence on China. Buddhism influenced art in the Tang period. Buddhist painting and court painting played a major role in documenting visual depictions of Buddha, monks, nobles, etc. Unfortunately, in 845, Emperor Wuzong instituted a major persecution, destroying thousands of Buddhist temples and shrines. The Tang period was also considered the golden age of Chinese figure painting. The purpose of these paintings, as pictured above, was to portray historical figures. The emperor is large and sits or stands in a symmetrical, undefined space, emphasizing his relevance in the painting. Ceramic sculptures of the Tang Dynasty were earthenware figures with colorful glazes that ran down the piece when fired and gave a dramatic look to the finished product. The horse was a popular subject of Chinese art and reflects the values that the emperors held in the quality of their stables. The horse in this picture has a richly harnessed saddle, testifying to the rider's nobility. The Song Dynasty was pretty boss. During this time period, the Chinese people invented cool stuff such as the magnetic compass for sea navigation, gunpowder, and paper money. There was also a pretty cool guy named Fan Quan. He was a Taoist recluse who shunned cosmopolitan life. He wanted to capture the essence of nature and its individual elements using brush and ink on silk. He painted vertical landscapes of massive mountains rising in the distance. Notice the nature dwarfing on the human and animal figures. The face of the mountain was painted with small pale brush marks, known as raindrop strokes, to emphasize the texture. Huizong assumed the throne a century after Fan Quan painted the mountains of Shaanxi. He was a great painter, poet, and calligrapher. He was famed for his promotion of Taoism, and he took huge efforts to search for art masters. However, he was more focused in art rather than governing. Thus, he lost a lot of territory in China and brought the nation to near bankruptcy. The primary subjects of his paintings are birds and flowers, as shown in the five-colored parakeet. During the Song period, a unity of the essential components fundamental to the art, vessel shape, potting techniques, glaze, decoration, firing processes, and aesthetic theory, were all combined in a high standard of excellence. Chinese potters developed sgraffito, which is incising the design through a colored lip. The architecture of the Song Dynasty was noted for its towering Buddhist pagodas, enormous stone and wooden bridges, lavish tombs, and its palaces. Early pagodas housed relics and provided a focus for devotion to the Buddha. Later pagodas served other functions, such as housing sacred images and texts. They were made out of stone and brick, but wooden pagodas were also common. An example would be the Yingxian 9-story octagonal pagoda. It is 216 feet tall and made completely out of wood. The Fogua Sea Pagoda is the tallest wooden building in the world. When the Jin captured Bianliang and the Emperor Huizong in 1126, Huizong's sixth son escaped and established a new Song capital. He ruled during the Southern Song period until 1279. The court still sponsored painting in the new capital, and in the Northern Song period, emperors took a direct interest in the painters of the Imperial Painting Academy. Members of the court frequently added brief poems to the paintings created. Then comes this guy named Liang Kai. He was a Chinese painter of the Southern Song Dynasty. He served in the Painting Academy of the Imperial Court. His early works included poetic landscapes, and after he left the court, he concentrated on figure painting, focusing on Chinese subjects. Next up is pre-Buddhism Japan. Jamon and Yayoi are two of the fundamental kingdoms during this era. Jamon is the earliest art-producing culture of Japan. The term means chord markings and refers to the technique Japanese potters used to decorate earthenware vessels. The Jamon people were hunter-gatherers, but unlike the normal nomadic societies, the Jamon were surprisingly settled. The villages consisted of pit dwellings, shallow round excavations with raised earthen ribs and thatched roofs. Their settledness allowed them to develop distinct ceramic technology even before they developed their agriculture. Some of the oldest pottery found is from this period. In addition to rope markings, incised lines and applied coils of clay were used to adorn the surfaces of Jamon pottery. All Jamon potters developed a feeling for modeled rather than painted ceramic ornamentation. Jamon pottery displays so many clay coils, stripped incisions, and glossy figural motifs that the basic function of the vessel is jeopardized. They served a variety of purposes such as storage, cooking, and bone burial. Jamon pottery contrasts strikingly with China's Neolithic earthenware. The vessel from Myeongnam is a dramatic example of an intricately modeled surface and a partially sculpted rim. After the Jamon period came the Yayoi period. Increased interaction with both China and Korea and immigration from Korea brought dramatic social and technological transformations during the Yayoi period. The Yayoi period was a time of tremendous change in the Japanese material culture as well. Yayoi ceramists produced vessels that were less sculptured than Jamon pottery. They developed bronze casting and loom weaving. The Kofun period was named after enormous earthen burial mounds or tumuli. Tumuli grew dramatically in the 4th century and served to proclaim the power and wealth of those buried in them. In 645, a series of reforms led to the establishment of a centralized government, in place of the individual clans that controlled Japan's different regions. Unglazed ceramic sculptures were placed on and around the Kofun tumuli. Usually several feet in height, the tumuli are distinctly Japanese. These statues appear deceptively whimsical as variations on a cylindrical theme. Hand-and-wall sculptures skillfully adapted a basic clay cylinder into a host of forms, from abstract shapes to objects. The artists altered the shape of the cylinders, applied ornaments, built up forms, and then painted the hand-and-wall. Hand-and-wall probably represented the realm of the deceased during his life. Despite predominance of Buddhism, Shintoism remained a vital religion for many Japanese. At the ice shrine, one can see the hatched roofs and metallic decorations. The sole construction of material is wood, fitted in a mortise and tenon system. 2 massive freestanding posts support most of the weight of the ridgepole. The beam at the crest of the roof. Golden cypress columns and planks contrast in color and texture with a white gravel covering the sacred grounds. The ice shrine highlights the connection, central to Shinto, between nature and spirit. Now let's go into Buddhist Japan. There was originally fierce resistance to the new religion that led to a civil strife and armed conflict between opposing Japanese factions. During the Asuka period, the ruling elite embraced major elements of continental culture that had been gradually filtering into Japan. These cultural components, which ultimately became firmly established in Japan, included Chinese writing, Confucianism, and Buddhism. This led to the Asuka and Nara periods. Japan followed Korean and Chinese prototypes very closely, especially during the Asuka and Nara periods. The early Buddhist architecture in Japan adheres so closely to mainland standards that surviving Japanese temples have helped greatly in the reconstruction of what has been almost completely lost on the Asian continent. During the Heian period, the Japanese imperial court developed as a center of an elite culture. Exchanging poetry became a common social practice and preoccupation with lovers. The tale of Genji is a flawed example of this concept. The set originally consisted of 10 hand scrolls produced by 5 teams of artisans. Human figures appear constructed of stiff layers of contrasting fabrics, and the artists simplified the aristocratic features in the people. After the fall of the Heian era, the victors of a civil war between rival Japanese warrior families established a government at Kamakura in eastern Japan. Artists, for the most part, did not work independently but with workshops. Membership was based on family relationships, and they formed familial artistic clans, handing down skills to head men of the family. Artistic cooperation also serviced in court boroughs housed at the imperial palace. Master painters laid out composition, and junior painters applied colors. Priest artists also traded temple workshops to make Buddhist art objects for public viewing as well as images for private mediation. And last but not least, we have Korea. From the 1st century BC until the 7th century BC, Korea was divided into 3 states, which the period is later referred to as the Three Kingdoms period. During this era, Korea remained in continuous contact with both China and Japan. Because China had such great influence on its neighbors, Korea and Japan essentially adapted many teachings, religious practices, and artistic forms. Buddhism came to Korea from China in the 4th century CE. However, Korea was the crucial artistic, cultural, and religious link between the mainland and the islands of Japan. So later, Buddhism also spread to Japan. Confucianism was also brought to Korea from China in the early Three Kingdoms period. Buddhism was the dominant religious and cultural influence during the Silla and Goryeo dynasties. As for the architecture, much of the architecture in this period was related to religion and influenced by political power. In the Three Kingdoms period, some people lived in pit houses while others lived in raised floor buildings. It was built out of wood with simple brackets and bright and soft coloring. The Silla Kingdom was one of the 3 kingdoms of Korea and one of the world's longest sustained dynasties. Around the year 688, Silla managed to conquer the other 2 kingdoms and unify Korea. During this time period, they created Shakyamuni Buddha. Unlike rock-cut Chinese Buddhist shrines, this was made out of granite blocks. In addition to that, the main Boyo vase was made, and features highly translucent iron-pigmented glazes with incised designs. It has heralds interpressed among mallow and lotus blossoms. The crowns of Silla were made in the Korean kingdom of Silla, approximately in the 5th to 7th centuries of the Common Era. The Silla crowns are very fragile and weigh more than 1 kilogram. The delicate nature of the gold crowns comes from the fact that they were made from cutting thin sheets of gold. The crown is impractical to wear, and some believe that the crown may have been specifically made as a burial good. After nearly 1,000 years of rule, Silla fragmented and handed over the power to his successors dynasty, also known as Goryeo Dynasty. The Goryeo, also known as Goryeo Dynasty, was the Korean dynasty established in 918 by King Taeho. 2 of this period's most notable products are Goryeo Caladion pottery and the Tripitaka Koreana, which are Buddhist sculptures carved onto roughly 80,000 wood blocks and stored in Hainsa.